with us, including the Chicago Housing Justice League, One North Side. We have folks from Access Living. We have Communities United, and we have the Chicago Union of the Homeless. I also want to point out that there are multiple organizations that are not with us here today, but that are also engaged in the fight for housing justice across the city of Chicago, that are not part of our meeting tonight, but they are part of our movement because we all believe that housing is a human right. We're all engaged in that battle. But today's meeting was put together by Northwest Side independent political organizations that I just listed out. And I do want to thank everyone for helping us put this event together. So tonight's town hall was organized because the issues and the struggles of housing injustice, of the high cost of living, and for housing instability and financial instability has existed long before COVID-19, but has grown exponentially over the past year. An estimated 30 to 40 million people right now across the United States are at risk for eviction. Many homeowners are struggling to pay their mortgages and their property taxes, and many hundreds of other people are forced to live on the streets, forced to bear the elements without any support, without housing, without wraparound support services. It's a real injustice and it's a real crisis that is developing around us and in our communities. I also want to make a brief note for all of our presenters today. If you can speak slowly so that our interpreters have some time to accurately translate everything that you're saying, try to keep note of that. We had one other community member who was going to speak with us today to share his experience with homelessness. His name is Dennis Domsky. He is somebody that I work with personally in my professional capacity. I've been working with him for the past couple months to try and find him housing, to try and find him other different support services, to try and get him simple things as such like his state ID, and to get him a social security card that he lost. Both of these forms of identification are essential to be able to get many things, to be able to get shelter, to be able to get different types of services. And unfortunately, for individuals experiencing homelessness, it can be a very, very long and hard process to get these things. On top of not having any secured housing, those documents can be lost easily when you're sleeping out on the streets, or if you drop it or someone pickpockets you, unfortunately. And this is something that Dennis has been experiencing. Unfortunately, Dennis is unable to join us. He was supposed to be joining us this evening, but I'm not sure what's happening right now. Perhaps he's dealing with something, and I know it's cold outside. Perhaps he couldn't make it over here in time. I think it speaks. It's a testament to the struggles that people who are experiencing homelessness deal with. But I did get a couple notes from him that I do want to share with us, because our organization, as well as many other organizations that are here with us today, believe in uplifting and amplifying the voices of the most impacted people in our community. So I just want to share some of the things that Dennis shared with me in our conversation yesterday. He informed me that he's been homeless since 2010. He's experienced homelessness for 11 years. He says that his experiences are different every day. Some days are easy, some days are hard to get by with food, to get by with a safe place to stay. Sometimes he's able to get temporary housing, and sometimes he's able to get a job. But because of the instability of all those things in between, it's very easy to lose them. He says within the homeless shelters, some procedures change, and it's hard to acclimate to that. He says sometimes there are different people within those places, and sometimes those human relations are hard to maintain, are hard to create. It's hard to change with different surroundings on that day-by-day situation. He also says that more and more he grows irate with his situation, that when he first experienced homelessness, he thought it was going to be a temporary thing. that he was going to be able to find housing and get out of his situation very quickly, but that was not the case. And each year that has gone by, he's grown more hopeless. He's grown more depressed. He's grown more sick, and he's grown more and more tired. He also shared with me that it breaks his heart that there are people in our community who can be so dismissive of him as a human being, that can look at him and not care for him, not give him peace of mind, not interact with him, to ignore him, to think that he is below all the other people just because he's experiencing something different. And I work with this man, every other week to try and help him get his things. And he is not below us. He is one of us. Any one of us on this call can experience homelessness. And we have to be aware of that. And we have to recognize that people experiencing homelessness are not the problem. And that people who are struggling to get by are not at fault for their circumstances. And that it is due to a myriad of problems that force people into homelessness, that force people into growing debt. And this is something that Dennis is not invincible or immune to. And it's something that none of us are invincible or immune to. And there are a couple other things that he did share with me, saying that, we don't know what it's like to not be able to finish the workday and not have a home to come home to, or bed, or running water, and that you have to fight for these things out in the bare streets. So those are a couple of the experiences that Dennis shared with me, and I wanted to uplift that in this space here. And we're going to be entering in a discussion, a group discussion. We're going to break out into small groups so that we can all talk about the different experiences and the different conditions that we're witnessing, either within our own homes or within our communities. It's sometimes really easy to not talk about these things. But I assure you that there are hundreds and hundreds of people within our community who are struggling to get by. And so we want to create a little space for us to go over that and to talk about that. So I do want to notify our technical support team if we can start the breakout discussions rooms. Within these rooms, we're also going to have discussion questions that we'll be going over. And if facilitators can please take note of the experiences that people are sharing so that we can report that back and talk about it as a larger group. After that, we're going to hear from some organizations who are advocating for certain laws here within the city of Chicago. And then we're going to hear from 3 aldermen, Alderman Carlos Ramirez-Rosa of the 35th Ward, Alderwoman Rossana Rodriguez of the 33rd Ward, and Alderman Daniel Spata of the 1st Ward. And they'll be sharing with us their fights in City Council, and we'll be answering some of the questions that we received and that we will be receiving throughout tonight. So we want to create this space now for folks to report back on their breakout discussion groups. Facilitators who are able to report back some of the stories or experiences that people brought up, if you can write stack in the chat and I'll call you out. First, I see we have Marco. Marco, can you report back for us, please?
Thank you, Anthony. We had a great group, varying neighborhoods, even former residents of Chicago as well. And many of the same issues were parallel, whether you were in Lakeview or Humboldt Park, to be honest. And some of the main issues when we talked about the guiding questions was really the frontline issues for workers that have to risk their lives and potentially bring that risk back into their home. And texting access to those that may be displaced right now was another big talking point for our group, which we all know that there have been efforts in that, but they have fallen a little bit short. So some of the members in the group talked about that. What justice looks like, I think that's why most of us are here tonight, is really to see what ways we can get involved and what ways we can help and what legislation is out there and how we can support our aldermen and alderwomen and fighting and combating this housing issue. We also talked about the differences and challenges for renters and homeowners with the fleeing of people and consolidation in housing. We have a lot of homeowners that are experiencing vacant units, which means, harder issues to pay their mortgage and loss of income. On the renter side, some of us have had to move back home and also, have shortened hours, whether, they're essential workers or not. The employment issues kind of stem from there as well. But there was a lot of good discussion, and I appreciate everyone in that group.
Thank you, Marco. Next, we have Emily Hall.
Thank you. Yes, we had a great discussion as well. Thank you, everyone who was in our group for really participating. I'll speak to kind of some things so I don't repeat what Marco said. We spoke a lot about mutual aid networks and how these networks are really stepping up to fill the gap, whether that's through food distribution or pooling community members' extra finances. And one person in particular, Brandon, he's very involved with Logan Square Mutual Aid. He spoke to how much money gets raised just for rental assistance. The biggest request that the Logan Square Mutual Aid Network gets is for money for people to pay their rent. So even if the network is able to raise thousands of dollars, it's depleted super quickly because the need is so high. So we spoke to that. We're really grateful for the mutual aid networks. We also discussed that we want that our city and our state government to step up and to provide more resources for these issues so that it's not all falling on mutual aid networks. And then when we talked about housing justice, Bruce spoke to, housing for everyone, getting everyone off the streets and into a home. And then I believe it was Katie and spoke to the quality of those homes. Not only do we need to make housing a human right and make sure that everyone has a home, we do not want them to be dilapidated houses. We do not want them to have major maintenance issues or poor management or abusive management. We want to make sure that everyone, all of our community members, all of our neighbors have good quality homes to live in.
Thank you, Emily. I'm going to call on a couple more, and if folks can just keep it short, that'd be greatly appreciated. I do want to hear back from a couple more people. So I'm going to call on Pratap.
Just want to echo especially what Emily mentioned there. One of the members of our group was just talking about how, mutual aid is doing a really good job of meeting current needs, but we still need answers in the long term. A lot of the structures that we have currently aren't built to respond to the needs of homeless folks in the area. So the other things that came up were just the many ways in which, other circumstances can exacerbate, the existing conditions of the pandemic. Things like having dependents, being immunocompromised, being undocumented, they make navigating these systems even more challenging. And then the final note that I thought was really valuable is that when we think about what housing justice looks like and we think about what affordable housing looks like, we really need to examine the meaning of that term affordable and make sure that it is affordable truly to everyone, right? Available for everyone, and not, affordable still for just a select few.
Thank you, Pratap. And lastly, Julie. Back.
Hi. So some of the things that we talked about was the fact that we have folks that are living on the street, but yet there's a lot of empty, unfilled apartments in our neighborhoods. People can remain homeless for very long periods of time, like as much as a decade, and same with people with disabilities struggling to find housing for long periods of time. We've seen rents going up. Landlords, we heard about wanting to raise rents significantly even during the pandemic. In terms of housing justice, we talked about wanting to see funds divested from the police and invested in purchasing housing and providing affordable housing for people on the streets. We talked about the connectedness between health and employment and housing, and how we need to work together and link all those issues and fight those things together. We also heard from some young people about students in their schools who are experiencing poverty and homelessness, and the schools are not able to meet their needs, and the city should be doing more to address housing issues for young people.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this group discussion. Because of COVID, we don't have a lot of spaces these days for us to meet together and congregate together as a community. But thankfully, we have technology. Thankfully, we have amazing organizations that were committed to building this space and to talking about the issues of housing injustice and instability. And thank you, everyone, for participating in that. We're now going to bring up some presenters from various campaigns throughout the city of Chicago that are fighting for housing justice. As I mentioned earlier, there are many other organizations in our city that are fighting for many other initiatives. We will have more meetings, in the future, and we'll be able to talk about so many more. We did want to highlight a couple key issues here. So first, I'm going to present Kathleen O'Brien, and they are going to talk about the Chicago Inclusive Housing Ordinance, and they are with Access Living and Chicago Housing Initiative. Kathleen, if you will come up and present, please.
Hi, my name is Kathleen O'Brien. I'm the housing organizer at Access Living. And am I muted? It says to unmute myself.
You're okay. I hear you.
I'm so sorry. I'm the housing organizer at Access Living, and we're a member of the Chicago Housing Initiative. And I'm going to talk today about two ordinances that CHI has been fighting for a long time now. One that will create more affordable, accessible, family-sized housing, and one that will utilize housing that already exists to protect those vulnerable to COVID-19 and other sicknesses. In December 2019, I, along with two other members of the coalition, joined the mayor's inclusionary zoning task force. And after those meetings, which took about a year, the Department of Housing published a report that said that we needed to build more housing that was affordable to Latinx and Black families, and build more housing that they could actually move into, because they need family-sized units, 2 and 3 bedrooms. This was a report about how to reform the Affordable Requirements Ordinance, which has been in existence since 2007, but has only produced about 444 affordable units. And so after that report was published, the Chicago Housing Initiative worked with Alderwoman Maria Haddon and many of the alders on this call to write the Chicago Inclusive Housing Ordinance, which would require that apartments built be affordable to families who make $27,000 to $45,000 a year, as most families of color in the city do, and that 2/3 of those be 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. It also, the ordinance also prevents the way that most people buy out, most developers buy out of those requirements by banning the in lieu of fees that exist in the current ordinance. The Department of Housing says they cannot get behind this ordinance. They say that they pointed out a true thing, which is that the in lieu of fees fund current affordable housing programs. Luckily, in the Chicago Inclusive Housing Ordinance, we created a solution for that is actually in the city's report. It would require people building dense commercial buildings to have to pay a fee that would fund those programs. The city says that lowering the AMIs and requiring family-sized housing is too much of a burden on the developer. So they want to build 1 and 2 bedroom apartments that are affordable to people who make about 20% more than the average family of color does in Chicago. And that is not good enough. And the other ordinance that we have been fighting for and we think is very important is the COVID-19 public health and housing ordinance, which would require that the CHA utilize about 1,250 vacant units that they've admitted are vacant in their own reports to house people who are currently experiencing homelessness and prioritize people in dangerous congregate settings like nursing facilities and homeless shelters for those and other public housing units going forward. It would also require that any city-funded developer, including the CHA, be required to keep their occupancy rates at 97%, which is nationally required by most public housing authorities. And it would require that vacant unit turnaround time is reduced to 60 to 90 days. Currently, it takes, when somebody moves out of an apartment, it takes the CHA over a year, well over a year, to get an apartment ready for somebody else to move in. And all of these things keep these resources that we do have really underutilized when we all know we're in an emergency. And these two ordinances, the city and Chairman Osterman of the Housing Committee say that they can't get behind these two ordinances because of lack of political will. But I'm speaking to a group of people who know how to build political will, and there are aldermen on this call who have the political will to move these things. So let's get that going. And I think I have the pleasure of introducing Frank from the Chicago Housing Justice League and Lawyers Committee for Better Housing to talk about Just Cause.
Thanks, Kathleen. I appreciate you passing it on to me, and good evening, everybody. Nice to see everyone, some old faces and some new. They've asked a lawyer to limit their comments to 5 minutes. I don't know if that's possible. So everybody, what's the expression? Hold on to your butts. Here we go. I'm going to speak about just cause for eviction, a proposed ordinance pending in the Housing Committee of City Council right now. And I'd like to start by thanking the 3 aldermen with us tonight, Dan Spata, Rossana Rodriguez, and Carlos Ramirez-Rosa for their support in co-sponsoring this very important piece of legislation. So let's take a step back for just a split second here and say there's about 600,000 rental units in the city of Chicago, housing about 1.4 million Chicagoans. That's way more than 50% of all Chicagoans are renters. That shouldn't be any great surprise. Yet there's an average of about 23,000 eviction cases filed against Chicagoans every single year. And while some of them are for ordinary things like non-payment
Can I pause you super fast? Could we just speak a little slower for our interpreters?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, some of those evictions are for simple things like non-payment of rent. We've estimated that as many as 25% are for without any cause or reason at all. That's displacing 6,000 families in Chicago every single year through no fault of their own. Now, when we add on to that, the number of families who move under threat of eviction, but before a case can be filed, it's well over 10,000 families displaced every single year in Chicago when they've done absolutely nothing wrong. So let's look for just a second and say, so what is the importance of housing? Well, we all know that housing is a basic human need, but it's really more than that, isn't it? At the larger level, housing is the centerpiece of a healthy neighborhood with good public transportation, good public schools, jobs that pay a meaningful wage, a healthy food system, the arts, public spaces. At the individual level, housing is the platform from which other meaningful life activities spring. Your friends, your neighbors, your school, your church, your sense of place and belonging in the world. So when we see the importance of housing, our motto becomes housing is a human right, and even Democrats say that. But what's the rest of the phrase? Housing is a human right, not merely a commodity to maximize profit. So if housing ought to be a human right, then the very first principle must be the legal protection of that sense that you and your family can lay down roots and become a full participating member of a community without living against the background uncertainty of being displaced without just cause. So one vehicle for uplifting housing as a human right is passing just cause for eviction, currently in the Housing Committee at Council. For over 200 years in Illinois and in Chicago, a landlord has been legally permitted to not renew your relationship or to terminate your relationship and evict you for any reason at all or no reason at all.
Frank, one moment. If you can, in between those things, take small pauses for the translators, the interpreters, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So no-fault terminations and no-fault non-renewals and no-fault evictions are primarily the vehicle of displacement. They displace over 200,000 African Americans from Chicago in the last decade, and approximately 30,000 Latinx Chicagoans in the last decade. No fault is the tool of the gentrifier, the flipper, and those few landlords that attempt to hide or mask their illegal discrimination or their illegal retaliation. So the Chicago Housing Justice League's Just Cause Bill, number one, puts a stop to no-fault terminations, no-fault non-renewals, and no-fault evictions, and changes the course of that 200-year history. If a landlord wants you to move, they now must have one of the 7 reasons listed in that law. 3 of them are traditional tenant fault, like non-payment of rent or disrupting your neighbors. But 4 of the reasons have nothing to do with the renters, but are commonly considered good reasons that a landlord might have, like the need to substantially repair the premises, condo conversion, moving in a qualified relative, or taking the unit off the market. And so what the Just Cause Bill says, for those 4 landlord motive reasons that have nothing to do with the tenant, where the tenant's done nothing wrong, the landlord should pay relocation assistance to the tenant. Because if you're asking somebody to move after they've been in the same place for years or even decades, then justice requires that they not bear the financial burden of that 100% all on their own. Okay, so just cause is an important step toward recognizing housing as a human right. It is also a matter in Chicago of racial justice. The top 10 neighborhoods in Chicago with the highest eviction rates are all African-American neighborhoods. South Shore, Austin, Auburn, Gresham, Chatham, Greater Grand Crossing, the Near North Side, Rogers Park, etc. Now, least we think from hearing from landlord associations that just cause is somehow novel or unusual. It is not. Over 10 million rental units nationwide have been governed and are governed by just cause laws. The entire state of New Jersey, the entire state of California, the entire state of Oregon, the entire state of New Hampshire. There are other cities as well. Philadelphia, most of New York City, Seattle, Washington, D.C., and as of last week, St. Paul, Minnesota, just to name a few. Surprisingly, over 40,000 of Chicago's own rental units have been governed by just cause for decades. So this is a known quantity. We know about just cause. It's not new. We know how it works. no one can realistically say that it harms landlords. I want to conclude. I want to say that we are living at a critical juncture in our city's history. And if we want a city where people can thrive, then we need to start adopting people-centered policies rather than continuing to cater to the demands of profit. We need to set a landscape that encourages ordinary folks to actively participate in the well-being of their neighborhoods. Passing the Just Cause bill is one small but important step in that goal. So if you want to learn more or you want to volunteer, just go to www.justcausechicago.org and you'll see a way to do that. That's my time, and I appreciate that for everybody. And I want to pass the torch to Diane Lemus of Communities United. Diane.
Thank you, Frank. My name is Diane Lemus. I'm a volunteer for...
Diane, one moment, please. So just in between every 10 to 15, maybe 20 seconds of speaking, try pausing, and then you can carry on. Maybe pause for like 2 to 3 seconds and then carry on, just as a brief reminder.
Thank you. So again, my name is Diane Lemus. I'm a volunteer for Communities United, a grassroots, boots on the ground social justice organization that organizes in Roseland, Westridge, Albany Park, Belmont Cragen, and Austin. We are also a member of the Bring Chicago Home campaign to end homelessness. I want to thank Anthony for sharing Dennis's story today. If I asked the folks in the audience how many people in Chicago are experiencing homelessness, what would you guess? 5,000? 10,000? 20,000? Well, let me tell you, the actual number is 77,000 people experience homelessness each year in Chicago. A majority of these people are living doubled up. The city does not count the double up people as homeless, but based on our outreach, we know that people would be on the streets or in homeless shelters if they were not couch surfing or in a doubled up situation. According to the data provided by All Chicago, 22,478 people were served in the shelter system. Of those, 6,325, or 28%, had been living doubled up with family or friends at some point that same year before they ended up in a shelter. Doubling up means homelessness. Seeing homelessness is uncomfortable. Some of us feel uneasy when we are approached by a homeless person asking for help. Some of our elected officials think that we should create laws that hide homelessness, not end it. Finding the courage to take on the task of ending homelessness requires feeling uncomfortable. It requires all of us to act. The city has made very little progress to end homelessness and advance racial equity, especially knowing that 80% of the people experiencing homelessness in our city are our brown and Black folks. Homelessness is a crisis within a crisis. We see new data every day on how homelessness in Chicago is increasing since the COVID began. The people that are homeless are experiencing several other health risks. And we know they are medically vulnerable to the COVID. When COVID hit, we could really see the issue with homelessness and why it was so unsafe. And the city was forced to respond. I'm afraid that the way our elected officials will measure the success of how they treated homelessness and the COVID will be measured by how few people were physically harmed, rather than how many people are no longer homeless. The very wealthy are making millions of dollars on this pandemic, even though more folks are at risk of becoming homeless. And when the moratorium on eviction ends, we will see noticeably more people entire families becoming homeless. So what is Bring Chicago's Home proposal? What is our proposal? There's a solution to homelessness. Permanent housing with all of the supporting systems in place. Create a progressive revenue stream. Tax the wealthy. Focus on the real estate transfer tax or RET tax as a long-term strategy. We can do this. We can do this if we have the political will to make it happen. Creating city resources for homelessness would create the flexibility needed to address all forms of homelessness. This summer, Bring Chicago Home plans to reintroduce a resolution to get the question on the ballot to give constituents the opportunity to weigh in on raising the real estate transfer tax on properties over $1 million and dedicate a portion of those resources to address homelessness. Our ask to our elected officials here today is, will you commit to co-sponsor our resolution and publicly support this campaign? And we will re-ask this question to the aldermen at the panel section of our agenda. Thank you. And now I will turn it over to Bruce from the Chicago Union of Homelessness, of the Homeless. Bruce?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Bruce Perry. I am the Veteran Coordinator for the National Union of the Homeless, and I'm the Veteran Coordinator for the Chicago Union of the Homeless as well. I am formerly homeless myself, and the basic mission of the Union of the Homeless is to end homelessness and to end poverty, to get people off of the streets. We will only get what we are organized to take. And we are homeless. We are not helpless. The union is an effort to organize all the homeless in their own self-defense across all of Chicago. And of course, the National Union is working across the country. The key here is that no movement of the oppressed and of the exploited has ever been successful where those who are oppressed and exploited didn't lead that movement. It is crucial that we build a movement of the poor and dispossessed in this country led by the homeless, and the union is the organizational manifestation of that need. This union is not an industrial union. It's not a trade union. It is a political union. And we are a union, but we are in the fight for political power, as has already been said. And I just want to comment that the comments so far have been excellent. There's a huge body of understanding and knowledge within this group that we all need to bring to the problem. The union is organized, has an executive board. The majority of the people on the board are homeless. 7 out of 11 are homeless and 3 are formerly homeless. So, it is a union led by the homeless themselves. We have an advisory council of people that advise the executive board on particular issues, and I will come back to how you can participate in that. We have what we're calling a representative council, and that is we are going to every encampment, to every shelter, to every gathering of homeless people. We are looking for particularly for student homeless organizations and gatherings of homeless students. We're going to the trains. There are gatherings around, for instance, CTA, people that live on CTA. And of course, we recognize and their squats, people who have taken over housing in their own behalf. We are organizing all of those and getting a representative from each of these locations to join the union, to represent that location within the union, and in that way to build the union. It's already been said, we estimate 77,000 people face homelessness every every year, as has already been said. We're only 5 months old. We were formed on October 22nd, and October 24th, and we're 5 months old. We're about 50 to 100 people right now. That is a drop in the bucket compared to what we need, and we are moving to organize the vast majority of the homeless across the city. We have many committees. People want to participate. We have a faith leaders committee of basically of clergy. We have a medical or healthcare committee that goes out. It's a very big need for for healthcare, as has already been said. We need lawyers. We do not have a lawyer. We need lawyers, at least one lawyer who is willing to devote themselves to fighting for the against evictions, for injunctions, and in defense of the people that are homeless within the union. We have a bunch of other committees, social media and things like that. Everybody can contribute to the union. The union is led by the homeless, but it consists of the homeless, the formerly homeless, and those who are supporters of the homeless and want to contribute. And you can contribute by coming out and helping us organize at the actual locations, or you can contribute by providing mutual aid, healthcare, faith leaders, clergy can bring their message to the homeless themselves. This is crucial. Mutual aid is there to support the self-organization of the homeless. So our primary purpose is not to provide mutual aid. Our primary purpose is to get people off of the street, to organize the homeless themselves, to end homelessness and to end poverty. We have had a whole series of actions, and one of the key ones is we have a petition with over 1,700 signatures. I'm going to put the link to it in the chat. If anybody has not signed it, please go to this link and you can sign it. That is a short thing, bit.ly/CUH petition. That is case sensitive. And the petition is based on the UN Declaration of Human Rights and calls for an immediate end to homelessness. This is aimed, we've presented it already to the governor, to the Cook County president, and to the mayor of Chicago. It calls for an immediate end to homelessness, for housing people in secure, permanent housing. It calls for medical care, mental and physical, for all of the homeless population. And it calls for recognition of the union as a legitimate representative of the homeless population. So that's our actions have been aimed also at the CHA. As has already been said, they have a whole slew of empty housing and their turnover rate is terrible. And we really need to get CHA to open up and to house the homeless, and we've been fighting on that. We have had the support of a number of aldermen, including Representative Carlos Rosa and Rossana Rodriguez, Alderman Byron Cistro Lopez, at our actions, and they are helping us in other ways. We desperately need a base of operations. So that's another thing that is coming up. Being homeless, I'm not going to repeat what's already been said, but another alderman who is not on this call and isn't going to be on this call, we got enough money to put some of the homeless people up in hotels during the polar vortex, when we got all that snow and temperatures were dropping down to desperately deadly levels. One of the aldermen took that opportunity to send Streets and Sam to take every tent, every tarp, every blanket, and all the personal property that people had left behind when they went to the hotel, and cleaned all that out and threw it away. Again, this was about 100 yards, 200 yards from the 2nd District Police Station. This is the kind of thing that we have to stop. And it's the kind of devastating, absolutely devastating action that has to be reversed. And what it takes to reverse is a change in the narrative. And we are bringing the homeless to have the narrative, to have their own narrative in this political battle that we're in. Thank you very much. And with that, I guess I'll pass it back to Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And thank you so much to all of our presenters. We do have some questions that we're going to be passing off to the aldermen after they speak momentarily. We did invite multiple aldermen to our town hall this evening because we are, we did reach out to residents and homeowners and renters and people experiencing homelessness on the Northwest side to today's event. 3 aldermen are here. Another alderman who didn't make it is the 32nd Ward alderman, but I do want to invite Emily Hall, who is with the 32nd Ward United, to speak on behalf of the 32nd Ward. Emily?
Thank you, Anthony. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Hall, and like Anthony shared, I am a resident of the 32nd Ward. I live in the Logan Square neighborhood, that part of the ward. And I'm also a leader with our independent political organization, 32nd Ward United. And we were one of the organizations that are hosting the event tonight. On behalf of myself and our IPO, we want to thank Alders Ramirez-Rosa, Rodriguez, and Spata for their attendance at this town hall tonight. 32nd Ward United did extend an invitation. Yes, I will slow down, thank you. Our IPO did extend an invitation to our alderman of the 32nd Ward, that is Alderman Scott Wagasback. We wanted him to be here tonight to be part of this very important discussion. Unfortunately, he declined our invitation. And we've been hearing that some of our neighbors in the 32nd Ward are facing hardships from COVID-19. And we're incredibly disappointed that Alderman Wagasback chose not to attend today's meeting, to hear from neighbors, to hear from community members, to hear these stories. And we were not given a reason, just that he was unavailable. As a constituent, it can be really frustrating to feel like my voice is not being heard. Alderman Wagasback is supposed to represent me and all of my neighbors in the 32nd Ward in City Council. However, I personally do not feel like any of us are given ample opportunities to engage with him. Alderman Wagasback does not host regular ward nights, regular town halls, where our neighbors can have frequent opportunities to talk to him about the issues that we're facing, such as financial and housing hardships that we have heard so much about today. All I want and all I wish for our ward is to have a true participatory democracy in the 32nd Ward, where myself and my neighbors and our IPO can have many opportunities to speak with our aldermen about the very real issues our community face. We don't have that right now, but I'm hoping that we can open that line of communication moving forward. So thank you, Anthony, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Emily. So now I'm going to kick it off to our aldermen who are present to speak about the ordinances and the campaigns that were just spoken about a short while ago, to speak about the efforts that they're fighting for. And then just as a quick note, if folks can remember, if the alderman can remember to answer the question from Diane Lemus about supporting the Bring Chicago Home ordinance. So first, I'm going to kick it off to Alderman Carlos Ramirez-Rosa. Carlos, so
Good evening.
There we go.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to see dozens of neighbors from across the Northwest side of the city of Chicago. My name is Carlos Ramirez-Rosa, and I'm proud to represent portions of 5 neighborhoods on the Northwest side of the city of Chicago, including Hermosa, Logan Square, Avondale, Irving Park, and Albany Park. During this time, we've heard from so many families that are struggling to keep a roof over their head. My office has heard from families that have been threatened with being locked out, which is illegal. My community has had issues struggling to keep up with the rent, struggling to keep up with mortgage payments. A record number of people have fallen behind on their property taxes as they go up and up and up. So it's so important that we're having this conversation tonight about housing, because as so many speakers have said tonight, housing is a human right. In our community, we've also seen an increase in people that are living on the streets because they have no other place to turn. We know that homelessness is not just people living in the streets, it's also people doubled up. It's also people sometimes sleeping in other people's basements for a few bucks a night that they pay them to be able to sleep there. But the most visible form that homelessness takes in our community are the number of people that are living in the streets. And all across this nation during this pandemic, we've seen an increase in the number of people that are experiencing homelessness and living in the streets. And that's true too here in the city of Chicago. Today is also the Trans Day of Visibility. So I also just want to uplift that it is our trans siblings who are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. If you just look at some of the statistics over the last several years, year after year after year, the number of trans people that are facing homelessness and the number of gender non-conforming people that are facing homelessness increases at a much greater rate than the general population. So we have to remember our trans and gender non-conforming siblings because they too need a safe place to call home. So as Alderman of the 35th Ward, I'm proud to have stood with so many of the organizations that are on that are participating in this town hall tonight to push forward policies to ensure that we have housing as a human right. One of those policies is the Bring Chicago Home Ordinance. Simply put, the solution for homelessness is housing. And in order to build housing for people that have little to no income, we have to be able to generate the funds to do that. And the Bring Chicago Home Ordinance would ensure that. So I'm proud to stand with the Bring Chicago Home Coalition, to stand with the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, to stand with Communities United, and all the other community organizations that are demanding that we as a city and as a state raise the real estate transfer tax. When those luxury houses are sold, when those big skyscrapers are sold, we should be taxing them at a rate that ensures that we have money to address homelessness in our community. So I'm proud to support that measure. I'm also proud to support Just Cause for Eviction to make sure that people have the ability to stay in their apartments and they're not being kicked out from 1 month to the next for no good reason at all. And I'm also proud to stand with the Lift the Ban on Rent Control Coalition. You know, it was some years ago that we came out in support of lifting the ban on rent control. And people said, oh, you all are absolutely out of it. There's no way that this will ever gain traction in this state or in this city. The realtor lobby is just too strong. Well, we've proven them wrong. And we've showed that when we fight, we win and we see important advances. And I'm so proud that we just passed that through committee. Now we have to fight to get it to pass the full House. In the 35th Ward in 2018, we put a measure on the ballot asking individuals if they wanted to lift the ban on rent control, and 72% said overwhelmingly yes at the November 2018 general election. So we know that our community stands for progressive policies that will ensure housing justice for everyone. And I'm going to continue to fight alongside my colleagues to make sure that we're doing what we can at the city council level to generate funds for individuals experiencing homelessness, to do what we can to keep people renting and keep them in their homes and not face displacement due to arbitrary landlords deciding to raise the rent exponentially from 1 month to another, or deciding that they just don't like the tenants that they have and want to kick them out now. And I'm so proud to stand in this fight with you all because it means so much that there are over 75 people on this call right now ensuring that we're having this important conversation about how we keep a roof over people's heads and how we keep people warm during those cold nights.
Thank you so much, Alderman. I now want to kick it off to Alderwoman Rossana Rodriguez-Sanchez of the 33rd Ward. Rossana?
Hello, everybody. Very happy to be here with all of you, and also very encouraged. It is really important for us that while we are in office, there is movement behind us, backing us up and guiding us on what is it that we need to be doing while we are in these seats. Because these seats should belong to you. These seats should belong to the people. One of the first things that I'm going to say, leading up to running for this seat, we were very committed to fighting for rent control, to fighting to lift the ban on rent control. And one of the ways in which we created our IPO was canvassing for the referendum for lifting the ban in our area. That has accompanied us to the seat, and it is a fight that we have continued to fight. I am very grateful for Alderman Carlos Ramirez-Rosa, who created a community-driven zoning process that we have adapted to our ward, and that creates a tool for participation of community in the decisions about how we are going to be developing our communities. That is important. People need to be able to vet those projects, because when we do developments in our communities, what we are doing essentially is increasing the value in a lot of ways when we grant zoning changes. If a developer is going to benefit from that, there has to be benefit to community. We cannot just give that to people. So we are very proud that we have been running this community-driven zoning process with organizations like Communities United, for example. They are part of our group of organizations. And I am also very happy and proud that we have been collaborating with Communities United in bringing more affordable housing to our community. In the next city council meeting, we are finally going to introduce the redevelopment agreement with Celadon Holdings, which is finally going to allow us to build affordable housing in our community, a building with 52 units. Mostly affordable housing. We are very pleased about that, but we also understand that that is a drop in the bucket, and that we need to continue fighting for development that is going to be able to keep our people in our communities. And we know how much Latino people we have lost in our communities, and how gentrification is devastating the possibilities of our people to stay. So we're going to continue to fight for that. In terms of Bring Chicago Home, I have been an ardent supporter of Bring Chicago Home. We're going to continue to fight for that because it's the right thing to do. During the winter, I was one of the first aldermen that opened up her office to make it a warming center, because we realized that the only 24-hour warming centers were police stations. How is it possible that in a pandemic, you are telling people that doesn't have homes that if they want to stay warm, they have to go to a police station? So we opened up our office, and we also we didn't get a lot of homeless people in our particular office, but because we didn't, we moved downtown and participated of the efforts of getting people into hotel rooms. And that was really important. And that's what every elected official needed to be doing at that moment. And we need to pressure our elected officials so that they do that work. It is incredible that we would abandon the most vulnerable people in moments that are so brutal. So we are definitely standing with all of you with Bring Chicago Home, with Just Cause. We're going to continue to fight to get housing justice for our communities, and to make sure that we end homelessness in Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rossana. I now want to kick it off to Alderman Daniel Spata of the First Ward. Daniel?
Unmute myself. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you so much to the organizers of this evening's event. Shout out real quick to First Ward United for their participation, for showing First Ward residents that there is a new home for progressive residents of these communities. Glad to represent for these last 2 years the communities in Logan Square, Humboldt Park, Westtown, Ukrainian Village, and Wicker Park. Communities who have been struggling with demolition and displacement for the last decade or more. And that is a struggle that I was very directly a part of. I spent pretty much all of my young adulthood paying 50% or more of my income towards my rent. I spent more than a year of my life being one of those doubled up Chicagoans, living out of an orange suitcase that was placed under a futon in a friend's studio apartment. My life never felt more unstable or more insecure. And that is as a single white college-educated man in his 30s. I cannot imagine how much more painful and anxious and traumatizing that has to feel to the mothers and fathers and parents out there who face this struggle on a nightly basis. Our heart and sympathy and empathy and solidarity is with you. So that means the work is creating the biggest, broadest toolkit that we can to resolve the affordable housing crisis that this city is facing. So part of that is how we do development and zoning. And again, a shout out to my colleague in the 35th Ward for leading the way on this, for showing Logan Square what community-driven zoning can look like. I'm so proud to have plagiarized off of the best and to really taken that model and adopted it in positive ways for the First Ward. That has introduced a lot of democracy to our community, and it has introduced a new word to a lot of developers in the First Ward, and that word has been no. Sometimes it's not maybe, sometimes it's not yes if, sometimes it's just no. And that's been a hard word for folks to understand, but that has saved a lot of housing in our community from demolition. Now let's talk about the new tools that we're working on. The inclusionary housing ordinance. Glad to support. We are finally going to turn the corner on more actual family-sized units coming out of new developments, not just a scatter of studios and one-bedrooms that don't work for any families. We're going to turn the corner on deeply affordable housing in our communities. 60% AMI. Let's remember that means working 60 hours a week at $15 an hour. That's more hours than I ever got at any of the minimum wage jobs that I've worked in my life. So we need to do better on that. Just cause for eviction. So powerful. I remember walking the doors, knocking on doors during my campaign, enjoying an evening water with one of our residents who talked to me about meeting her neighbor in tears on the corner at Humboldt and Lindale, and her sharing that she and all of her neighbors had just been evicted with minimal notice and not knowing where they were going to go. That doesn't need to be the reality for any Chicagoan. We can do better than that. We are going to do better than that. We are going to pass just cause for eviction in the city of Chicago. And the progressive real estate transfer tax, so happy to, when we're ready, I'm glad to be a co-sponsor of that resolution. We knew it was right. We knew it was popular a year ago. It was really disappointing to see how this administration decided to squash that. Some folks have proven that they're not willing to be collaborative or cooperative. And so this resolution, I believe, is going to be the strongest way to move forward. And I'm excited to move forward on that. And I think I've expended my time, but there are so many powerful tools that we can use, and we need every single one of them to bring about the 150,000 units plus of affordable housing that this city needs to be the stable, healthy, affordable city that every working family deserves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alderman Spata, and thank you to all of our aldermen for joining us. I do have a couple of questions that I would like for the aldermen to answer. So one of the questions we have here is what kind of assistance is currently being put forward for undocumented families in relation to housing?
I can take that on. We, at the beginning of this pandemic, began to hear from many undocumented Chicagoans who lost their jobs, were not able to keep up with their rent. And so one of the things that all of us, all the aldermen on this call have pushed for is to ensure that when the city of Chicago puts forward rental assistance dollars, which there was an initial round of funding that went out early on in the pandemic. There's now an additional fund that just opened up again. We work to make sure that those dollars were able to get into the hands of undocumented people. And to ensure equity in this process, many of us work very closely with the Department of Housing to make sure that the application was translated into all of the common languages that are spoken in the city of Chicago, but also that there was intentional outreach to individuals that are likely to be undocumented or likely to be struggling to pay their rent and are unlikely to find that information online or to be able to go online and fill out the application themselves. So through that outreach, I know the 35th Ward Office was able to help hundreds of people in just a matter of days apply for that emergency rental assistance. Now that the second round of funding has been approved by the City Council and is opening up that round of application again, we have fought to ensure that those funds would continue to be available to undocumented people, and we're going to continue that intentional outreach. In this moment, I think it's also really important to remind folks that regardless of their immigration status, that they too are protected by the laws of this country. And so we have heard disproportionately from undocumented people that they have been threatened with lockouts. And so my ward office recently went door to door in the neighborhood of Hermosa to leave a little Hermosa update that included information about the illegality of lockouts. There's a eviction moratorium. That means that if your landlord is trying to evict you because you have not been able to keep up with your rent, that process is not going to be able to move forward. You're going to be able to have more time to stay in your unit while we figure out how to get you the support that you need to remain housed during this pandemic. And one of the things that we want people to know is that your landlord cannot just say, I'm going to change your locks, I'm going to throw your things out on the street. That is illegal. And so the process in the city of Chicago is to call 911, to tell the police that you're being threatened with a lockout. But I also urge you to call your local alderman, especially if you live in one of the wards that's represented here today, because we will stand with you and we will fight alongside with you to ensure that your rights as a tenant are protected.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I have one other question. We have a couple more questions. This one is in regards to property taxes. What are you all doing and what else can be done to stop property taxes from going up? As we all are talking about today, we have homeowners who are here, we have renters, we've talked about people experiencing homelessness. What are you all doing and what can be done to stop rising property taxes? Daniel?
I will field that one. So there's what we can do on the assessment side, and there's what we can do on the levy side. On the levy side, the biggest thing that Alderman Rosa and Alderman Rodriguez-Sanchez and I can do and have done is vote no on budgets that raise your property taxes. We do this because we know that there are ways for the richest individuals and corporations in this city to pay their fair share. We put forward revenue ideas that hopefully our mayor is going to be prepared to listen to in this next budget cycle. But then there's what we can do on the assessment side of things. So part of that is working with the assessor's office to make sure that the maps that they're using accurately reflect our communities. You probably know, like, they have their township maps. Within those are neighborhood maps that are supposed to give a general idea of the housing qualities and types and areas. Those may have changed dramatically over the years. So that's one thing that my office is following up with Assessor Katie on. The other big thing is making sure that downtown properties get assessed fairly and accurately. We all probably have heard these stories, skyscrapers downtown that were assessed for $500 million, selling for $1 billion. $500 million on missed, inaccurate assessments get passed on to you and your neighbors. So making sure that that assessment process is clear, hopefully through passing the Assessor's Data Modernization Act in Springfield, but also making sure that the Board of Review does not hopefully come in and overturn some of these downtown assessments is going to be important. It is critical, since assessments only happen every 3 years, that we get it right this time around. I think those are the two big pieces, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And then we do have a question, this will be our last question, from our youth. And the question is, what can young people do to make efforts to slow gentrification, to stop gentrification in their communities?
Well, I think that young people should get involved in the various fights in their community to ensure housing as a human right. Alderman Spata and Alderman Rodriguez spoke about community-driven zoning processes. And in the 35th Ward, we were very lucky to have Logansport Neighborhood Association youth actually research zoning, research how we can get more affordability included in new luxury developments so that those new developments include affordability, that continue to house people that live in our neighborhoods. One of the things that they suggested was making sure that our process was more accessible via bilingual translation. So they put forward a number of suggestions in terms of how we could improve our process. So what I would say is look to the organizations that are part of this meeting right now. Many of them are involved in canvassing on doors. I started knocking on doors when I was 16 years old. So it's never too early to start talking to your neighbors about the issues that are important in your community. So young people have been central to these fights. They were at the forefront of fighting for the all affordable 100 unit apartment building that is replacing a parking lot. That's going to house families that are currently on the CHA wait list and families that make less than 60% of the area median income. So we would not have won that without the role of young people in that struggle. So there's a lot that you all can do. We need your voices. We need you to be present. We need your ideas. So yeah, reach out to our offices, reach out to the organizations here. And I'm sure there's work that needs to be done that you could probably enjoy and learn a lot from doing.
Yeah, I know we're over time. If I could just put in the quickest plug, please come out to these zoning meetings. I know zoning sounds super dry. Sometimes it is, but it was one of the most powerful tools that we have locally as aldermen to change the way development happens in your ward, in your community. The other thing is putting an email in the link. If you're 13 to 18, living in the first ward and want to be a part of our first ward youth council, going to be taking applications going into the fall. When I've been in here, our youth have actually been in the next part of my office working on service learning and legislative projects. I'm so freaking proud of every single one of them. So if you've got young people in Logan Square, Westtown, Wicker Park, we want to have their voices in our youth council come this fall. Please encourage them to apply.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us this evening. We went a little bit over time, but it's because there's so much to talk about. And I think it speaks to how many problems exist, right? But it is so empowering to see how many people are here willing to fight back, willing to come together and unite. As we all just pointed out today, I think we have a very clear understanding that there are all these problems, but they're human-made, right? Debt, poverty, homelessness are all human-made problems. And through our political will, through the solidarity of homeowners, of renters, of people experiencing homelessness, we can make the human-made solutions that we need. But that's only going to come through our collective people power. And so there is a link that some of the organizers have been dropping into the chat. If one of the organizers and facilitators can drop it in there one more time. Thank you, Jonathan. That is a form that you can fill out to find out how you can get involved with the organizations that participated this evening, and to fill out a quick survey about tonight's meeting. Again, we wish we had some more time, but there's so much more to talk about, and we look forward to organizing more meetings for all of us to continue this fight until we have housing justice for everyone. So thank you so much. We'll be closing this meeting tonight, and I'm so very thankful for being with all of you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
And thank you to our translators and for our facilitators, everyone on the technical side. Thank you so much for making this meeting possible.